All right, so Kristen, I'm just going to begin, and I'm just going to jump right in. So I'm Lesley Johnson. I'm a filmmaker and a programmer, and I directed the documentary I Hold the Dehcho in My Heart, about a group of Indigenous students paddling Canada's longest river, the Dehcho, which is also known as the Mackenzie River, to connect with Dene culture. And this was done through the Nhst Institute. And so this trip and the film is going to be the center of this talk. And the co-presenter of this talk is with us today, and her name is Kristen Tanche, and she's also the main character of this documentary. So hi, Kristen.
Hi.
You want to give your intro?
For sure. So, Kristen Tanche Suje, Sedze Tah Dehcho Samo Kathy Tanche Sedze Tah Dehcho. My name is Kristen Tanche. I am from Fort Simpson, the Northwest Territories. My mother is Kathy Tanche Sims, and my father is Gunnar Paulson. As a way of introducing myself, and this is how we introduce ourselves in our region, is saying where we're from and who our parents are so people can place us. So my mother is Dehcho Dene and lived in Fort Simpson for most of her life, and my father is from Wynyard, Saskatchewan, and is of Icelandic and settler Canadian descent. I grew up mostly with my father, so I didn't return to the Dehcho until about 15 years ago. So I grew up pretty disconnected from my mom and my Dene side and wanted to reconnect with my family, so have been in the Dehcho region since. In 2017, I worked for Nhst as their Dehcho coordinator in preparation for the Dehcho River semester, and then I joined this semester as a student.
Okay. So as Kristen was just mentioning, the trip that we went on was through the Nhst Institute, which is an Indigenous arts, culture, language, and educational program that provides university-accredited courses in land-based in scenarios. In 2017, they received some funding to do a river-based semester, which was the first time that they had attempted to organize a semester on the river, and did two trips, and one was on the Dehcho and the other was on the Peel. And so the idea was to have a group of Indigenous students paddle the rivers while learning language and land-based practices from elders in the region. And myself and several other filmmakers from the NWT were invited to document the river journey. And basically we took guidance from an Indigenous-led advisory team from Nhst, just to sort of determine how to focus the documentary. And we did it in the summer of 2017, and I'll quickly show some slides from the trip. Okay, so this is the group just across from Bear Rock, close to Toledo. And so that's our group, again, just very close to Bear Rock, near the town of Toledo. And at the boat launch there, and here is a lovely shot of Kristen coming up, right across from the Mackenzie Mountains, and an action shot. And the other character in the documentary that we followed was Gia Sibiston, and so that's a nice shot of her close to Fort Good Hope. And that is the group as we were, I believe, very close to Fort Simpson. So, Kristen, did you want to give a little bit more of a background around Nhst from the alumni perspective?
Yeah, so a little bit about the Dehcho region and about Nhst. So the Dehcho region is located in southern Northwest Territories, and within the region there's about 10 communities, and all the communities are connected to the Dehcho somehow, whether it be on the riverbanks or located on water systems that feed into the Dehcho. Essentially, the river connects all of our communities in the territory. And traditionally, this is how we traveled to see each other. But the river was also our people's lifeline, as we used it to travel to harvesting areas. We would harvest directly from the river and along it. We were nomadic people. And we were people and are people of the river. So up and down the Dehcho, there are places that are of a lot of importance to the people in our area. There's family areas, spiritual areas, historical areas. So essentially, if you're paddling down the Dehcho, you're paddling on the same water system that people have been paddling probably since the creation of it. There's also not only the Dehcho on the water system, there's also the Satu, the Gwich'in, and the Inuvialuit people. This trip didn't go up into the Gwich'in and Inuvialuit territory. We traveled through the Dehcho and the Satu. So not only did the water system connect our people in the region, it also connected us to people in other regions, such as the Satu, the Gwich'in, and Inuvialuit. So about 8 years ago, I took my first Nhst program out at Blatchford Lake Lodge. Then I took it again in the Mackenzie Mountains in the traditional area of the Satu, Gotene, and the Kaska people. The Dehcho River semester was my third program through Nhst. Each semester brought different life lessons and brought me closer to the Dene side of myself. So there's so many ways that the program has changed my life, from learning to respect the land to learning about the history of the land and the people of the land. There's so many teachings I was gifted through the programs that I've taken. But in a nutshell, growing up in a society where I was taught that being Dene was wrong, it was bad. And I learned that through society, through media, through every facet in life. But by being involved in the Nhst program, it helped bring me on this journey of self-realization that who I am is okay. Who I am as a person of mixed descent is okay, and that I could love and accept both sides of me. And that learning to love my Dene heritage is more than okay. Being Dene is who I am.
Thanks for that, Kristen. I think that's a perfect segue into queuing up. I'm going to show the first, just about six minutes of the film, and I think it just kind of really sets a great tone of the location, the people that were part of the group, the beginning of Kristen and everybody's learning process, and some of the elders that we were with. So if we could screen that, that would be great.
Every time you go on the land and you immerse yourself in culture and the land, you learn something new. Life is really short, and you should really take every opportunity I can, especially about being on the land and Dene culture.
This side goes, go down. Yeah. Going down. If we go like hand over hand there.
what we'll do is we'll start off with just the basics of canoeing, so how we want to prepare ourselves and then how we want to get into these canoes.
The Dehcho River semester is a semester that starts in Providence and ends in Fort Good Hope. Along the way, we're going to be stopping in each community on the Dehcho rivers.
You're on your own now.
What else it is a chance for me personally to explore the region that my mother and her side of the family came from. I guess like a lot of my life, I've struggled with my identity. I didn't really get to know like the Dene part of me, and so Nhst has really provided that kind of outlet and to learn more about myself and Dene culture. I'm currently enrolled in a social work program in Yellowknife. Had I been provided like with an opportunity to take social work programming with on-the-land learning, which I think is so tied into one another, it would have been a lot better. I'm nervous about like what happens if we dump and the canoe tips over, but what's helping kind of curb that is that I'm going to be learning about the places that like our ancestors traveled and traveling a route that many people traveled before us.
Oh, we're here.
Dehcho means big river. Deh is a river, and Cho is big. Some people say Dehcho. That's how I grew up talking about Dehcho. Many rivers flowing into it. I was born at Gazea, or Rabbitskin River.
Say that.
Sache.
That's the cha is the beaver, and tail is che. Sa, like this. Sa is bear. You say sa, 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 and this is cha. Cha, 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 and sa, sa, sa. Years ago, I was away a long time. I came back in the early 70s. One day I told him, means I don't speak our language too good. They're all schooled in Kaindele, so I don't say that. Just keep talking.
Mm-hmm.
Now the wind's got to blow this way. Come on, wind. Come on.
Throughout my life, I've always been really connected to our spirituality. Through residential school and colonization, that was taken away from the Dene people. I'm hoping that they learn to really see the land for what it is. It's not on just paper that they read about the significance of the land and the water by Dene people in the north, and they see it for themselves firsthand.
We've been actually talking a lot with elders and people, and I think really vital to learn from the people from the Northwest Territories and other Indigenous people about the history of the Northwest Territories, to tell you the stories about the place and to show you how to respect the area that you're coming through.
Pause it there. If you could bring Kristen back to me, that'd be great. Thanks. Okay. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the filming. And I also want to give a shout out to Dan Wong, who was the outfitter who helped us out on this trip. So yeah, thanks, Dan. Nice to see you. You did an amazing job, by the way. So to talk about the filming, so just briefly, it was myself and a team that consisted of basically 2 camera people, and we were essentially also participants on the trip, so we were living the same experience that everybody else was. So we were also only canoeing, we were shooting everything just by canoe, and we were packing all of our equipment into barrels and doing the journey like everybody else, camping, taking turns, cooking with the group, and participating in all the activities like the language camp and many of the things that we did along the way. So the other members of the camera team were Pierre-Emmanuel Chaillon, who lives in Fort Smith, and Nhst Nakeko, who was from Fort Simpson, Lidley-Quay. And so Nhst was actually from the area, and he really helped influence the story and the interviews and kind of helped really shape the story to kind of go in the direction of the poignancy of the students learning from elders from the Dehcho, many of whom had been to residential school. So that's kind of how some of the story came into Genesis. And I'm hoping that Kristen can talk a little bit more about her experience and some of the takeaways, I guess, from your journey on the river.
Sure. So as I look back at that journey, there are certain things that I think I'll always carry with me, and one of them is the importance of land-based education, and another one is the importance of working with Indigenous people in their territories. So before I took the Dehcho program, a lot of my academic experiences were that in a classroom setting, in a little room, learning from a desk. So I could count the number of times on my hand that we were given the opportunity to learn on land. So it wasn't very much, less than 10. So when I was looking at the title of this symposium, I think that many of you in the room already know the importance and the value of being on the land. Otherwise, why would you be sitting here today? But how many of us have really gotten to experience land-based education? And how many of us could have benefited from learning from a fireplace after a day of paddling while the birds are chirping and there's fresh air? And how many of us could have benefited from learning problem solving and critical thinking as we are about to hit a buoy with a war canoe for the 5th time in a massive river and think, hey, maybe we should stop getting so close to this dangerous buoy when there's like a vast river. Maybe we should give that buoy some room. That happened to us several times. I don't know how, but it happened. But I think those experiences really improved my critical thinking skills, and I'm hoping that other people on the trip too, because I no longer paddle anywhere near a buoy with large canoes. But in order to learn that lesson, I had to be there. I had to paddle hard. I had to feel the panic. I had to feel the power that it took to get away from that buoy. And I remember thinking at that time, man, maybe if we paid more attention to the elder or what we were doing, we wouldn't be getting ourselves into this buoy situation. We also learned a lot how to take care of the land, and so that was a huge takeaway for me, the experience of respecting the land and how every day we were taught to give offerings to the land, to clean up after our campsites, and also to really respect the land, because we were on one of the largest water systems in Canada that could take 1 hour to cross. So realizing the strength of it, that it's living, powerful, and it's not a force to be reckoned with, but loved, respected, and taken seriously. In an era where our Earth is experiencing large-scale environmental changes because of the actions of humans, on that river and on that trip, we really learned how to lessen our imprint on the Earth, to love, respect, and take our actions seriously. So none of these teachings would have been possible if it hadn't been for Dehcho's relationship and our group's relationship with some of the elders and cultural knowledge holders that we had on the trip. It would have just essentially been a big group of us paddling down the river. But because of their sharing of their knowledge, we were able to learn about their family areas, about magical Saskatoon berry bushes. We watched how to skin a beaver. We learned legends and stories of Yamurai and giant animals that once roamed the earth. And we were even able to see the imprint of those animals on Great Bear Rock. We got to see the hide of a beaver that linked to an old legend from our people. So the elders and the cultural knowledge holders really made the trip what it was. In the short doc, Gia, another participant in the program, talked about the significance of learning the Nhst language, how it was the language that came from the land. That while we were on the journey, we were able to begin to learn that language. We learned the meaning of Dehcho, and that our people never called the Dehcho Mackenzie. It was named Mackenzie after some person came up and discovered it. Our name for it was always the Dehcho. And you don't learn these things in a book. You learn these things from the people of the area, the people that have always and will always live in that area. So I really felt that our richest learnings really came from the land and from the land's people and from one another as we were all experiencing this together as a community.
Thanks, Kristen. Big round of applause there. Do we still have a few minutes that we can? Yeah? Okay, so if we have a few minutes, Kristen and I thought that since we were involved in this documentary together, it would be kind of fun to sort of just give ourselves a little round of lightning Q&A. So maybe we just have time for one or two questions to go back and forth. So I was going to ask you, Kristen, how have you carried this trip forwards in the work that you do? And how have the trips that you've planned since that time reflected Dene values in maybe a different way?
Yeah, so after the trip, I actually became employed by Dehcho First Nations as their regional on-the-land coordinator. And really because of the influence of it, I started looking at a regional canoe trip, which actually Jack Pine Dan Wong had some partnered with us on the first one.
More Dan Wong connections.
So lots of connections, right? So, and the trip really influenced how I planned the trip. I experienced so much on that Dehcho River semester that I knew that if I was able to help try to offer the same experience to others in the region, it would be amazing and it's so impactful for everyone, right? So all the trips since I've done that trip, take things into mind like stay away from boys, and always make sure that we have at the heart of our trips Indigenous knowledge, and that we are focused on language teachings and teachings of the area and cultural knowledge holders.
Excellent, thank you. Do you have a question for me?
I sure do. So Lesley, this isn't my first time working with you. We've actually worked before on other documentaries. And over time, I've really noticed how amazingly you work with Northern Indigenous people. Lesley is very respectful and a whole bunch of other amazing things. So could you tell us a little bit about your approach?
My approach? So I guess my approach as a settler filmmaker that has worked before in Indigenous spaces, when I work in that way, I guess my approach is always, I think, to be in support of Indigenous voices. So I'm usually either working to support somebody directly, who's the storyteller, whether I'm working as a producer to sort of, run like logistics to kind of like do everything to like help really support that voice, or I'm trying to work to the best of my abilities, to give a platform to center and amplify Indigenous voices. So I guess I would consider this documentary to be an example of that kind of a scenario. So, you know, listening to what you have to say, you know, I think is very critical and crucial. And so, you know, I'm doing the best that I can to kind of give your voice ample opportunity to be amplified across Canada in scenarios like this, and in as many spaces as I think, you know, it can reach. So, yeah, for me, I guess that's kind of the approach that I take. I've been so lucky to work in the North and have the experiences that I've had in my career in support of other Indigenous filmmakers. And I've been so lucky to be able to do things like this, traveling on the river, going to Dene communities, going to other Indigenous communities across the nation, and like hang out with really amazing people in the bush and on the water. So I'm just always really thankful for those opportunities when I can get them. And so, yeah, I think that it's really fun for me. So I mean, it's like I like to have a positive experience for everyone, and yeah, I think it's just really crucial to make sure that Indigenous voices are sort of like maintained like throughout the process, and kind of like leading like the story and development through like production all the way into post-production. So that's what we did in this story, right from conception. We had an Indigenous-led team that was sort of like really feeding into the ideas, right through post-production, where the filmmaker that, you know, we've most often worked with, Amos Scott, was really kind of helping give guidance. So I think that's really important when you're a settler filmmaker, is to make sure that you have that kind of Indigenous support around you. And I think it's a really good lesson sort of like in my kind of filmmaking community, but I mean, that's just sort of like one working experience. And I really think that like spaces like this, where you're in the paddling community, I mean, there's a lot to be gleaned from that as well, and sort of how we can work together with Indigenous communities, Indigenous-led scenarios. And so I think it's really kind of important to think about things like that, and to think about how we can really sort of like work in support of Indigenous voices, always like in the spaces that we connect into. So I think that that's a really good kind of maybe parting thought from this statement for the wilderness community. Yeah. So, oh, thank you. I think we might be out of time. So that is maybe a good place for us to wrap up. But maybe, do you have any parting thoughts, Kristen? Not to put you on the spot, but.
Sorry, I can't really. It broke up. I don't.
I was just gonna say we're wrapping up now. So maybe I'll just say, yeah. So I was gonna ask if you had any parting thoughts, but for the group here.
I think like the film really showed how amazing the experience was and how tough it was, and a huge thank you to Lesley and the film crew. They not only filmed us all and followed like 20 people around on the river while paddling, but they were also making dinner, helping with paddling, helping with wood, and doing all of that. So it was an amazing experience. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Kristen. It's on CBC, so it's available on CBC Gem. It's called Alex is going to email it. But it's on CBC Short Docs, the CBC Gem page, and it's called I Hold the Dehcho in My Heart. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Wow, that was really great. Thank you.